Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's Tabletop Tuesday. Time to grab a seat around the dining room table, play some games. Now, normally I'd ask you to roll for initiative or draw a card for playing some Dragonbane, but today we're going to dive into my number one and only tabletop card game addiction. I'll get that out here in a second. Magic the Gathering. Now, I won't bore you all with the epic retelling of the past 30 plus years of cards and sets put out, many of which are excellent and amazing in and of themselves. Now, my very first, and likely not last, MTG video, I want to talk about my personal favorite set to date. Bloomburrow was a set unleashed upon us last year, and the missuses and I bought way too much of it. But I don't regret a single pack. With the tagline, Tiny Tales Big Adventure, it burst onto the scene with heartfelt storytelling, adorable little cartoon anthropomorphic characters, and an aesthetic that, at least for me, harkened back to the days of Don Bluth and Disney's early animation. The setting is also contained, is a contained one. It's taking place in a single world called Valley. Further, any planeswalker, those mages that can travel from different worlds within the game, that travels to Valley becomes anthropomorphized as well, giving us just the most adorable versions of long-running MTG characters y'all have ever seen. Presents a world where existence is reflected in a cycle, instead of other often used philosophies where death and life are simply positions on a wheel. In fact, one race within Bloomburrow, one of my favorites, squirrels, are caretakers and scholars of this cycle. This all ties up nicely and presents forces normally forbidden, such as necromancy, as simply a reflection of this internal cycle. Good and evil are muted here, and with destruction really the only force one could point to as being universally undesirable. However, even this is subjective, as we have otters and lizards commanding highly destructive forces. It's a refreshing change intellectually, as I'm pushing 50 and the edgy stuff just doesn't appeal to me as it once did. The art throughout the set is some of the best I've seen in any MTG product. Just beautiful paintings illustrating the world and its characters. introducing us to a cycle of basic and non-basic lands whose art changes depending on the time of year. The legendary land Three Tree City in particular is really breathtaking. Of particular note to me was David Peterson's contribution, giving us a Mabel heir to Cragflame that easily could have stepped out of the pages of his wonderful work on Mouseguard. And if you haven't checked out his Mouseguard series, it's worth a look. But I digress. What really surprised me was this set is that it doesn't shy away from suffering and loss. With a setting such as this, all cute and fuzzy, like an epic adventure populated entirely by stuffed animals, there's the temptation to stray away from anyone actually being hurt. But it can't be a heroic journey if only Sean Bean dies. And so, Bloomburrow presents that bad things happen in cards like Calamitous Tide, Savor, and Wildfire Howl, while not dwelling on the minutiae of unpleasant ends. On a lighter note, I was glad to see as well that the set didn't shy away from dad jokes, with cards like Crumb and Get It and Cash Grab. Hey, like I said, I'm middle-aged and I enjoy me a good groan-induced laugh. The set introduced us to a slew of new mechanics. Offspring, where a summoned critter brings along a kid version of itself, just like in the trailer. Gift, where you can grant your opponent a minor boon for an increased effect on your own spell. Valiant, where a critter has some sort of effect triggered by being targeted. Expend, which has an effect based on how much mana you spent that turn, encouraging folks to keep track of mana expenditures, which isn't nearly as challenging as it sounds, usually. Unless you're playing blue-red otters like the misses, but anyway. Also Forage, where you exile cards in your graveyard or food for an enhanced effect. Of all the effects introduced, I like this one the most, but I also adore squirrels, so that figures. Not as much as Trash Pandas. Trash Pandas number one. Sadly, Wizards of the Coast has committed itself to putting out a ton of sets every year. It's just good for variety and probably a decent marketing strategy, as they're bound to hit a good set with this many being shotgunned out every year. But I also feel like individual sets tend to get lost in the rush, which is precisely what I felt happened with Bloomburrow. When a set has only a scant couple of months to be relevant in Wizards of the Coast marketing, it definitely gets flushed downriver when this next set comes out. So I didn't feel like Bloomburrow really had a lot of time to sink in and get its due. However, that's not the case here at our house, and I suspect at many houses out there as well. Whenever the fever comes over the missus and I to bust out some decks, I invariably grab one or more Bloomburrow ones. And yes, I have several to choose from. This set was absolutely robust enough to fill out a tribal theme with minimal additions from other sets, if any at all. And that's always the challenge. A new set introduces something you want to dive into, really swim around in, but sometimes there's just not enough support there to make an entire deck out of. Take Lord of the Rings, for example. I've been hard-pressed to make more than 2 or 3 immersive themed decks from that set, as the tribal pool's just not that consistent and deep, leading to forced inclusions from other sets that just kills the purest aesthetic in me. But that is until I just go on Etsy and order some custom cards, but again, I digress. All this being said, this set in particular stands out in my mind as my all-time favorite to date, and absolutely the first one I wanted to talk about here on the show. It's fun, it's adorable, and it presents enough robust, immersive choices that I can walk the hidden trails of Valley and not have to come out again, if I don't want to, which I don't. It's a 5-star set for me. I would highly recommend it to long-time and new players. Well, so long as they don't mind immersing themselves in a Don Bluth movie, that is. Anywho, that's about all I got today, and I hope this here video entertained y'all, and if it did, might I impose upon you for a like? YouTube loves it when you do, and it helps my little itty-bitty little channel grow and grow. Speaking of, welcome to all the new faces who subscribed, I thank you, and I hope you enjoy this little hillbilly's antics in the meantime. Now, it's Tabletop Tuesday. Gather up the friends and the fam and the frenemies, grab a seat around the table, bust out some games, roll the initiative, grab some cards, bust out the minis, make sure you drink some water, and as always, have a good one.